Really the only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain while I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next well. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next well. Guess I got next still. Hey, really the only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest.
There we go. We're here, Jake. Look at us. Welcome to BestBell Fantasy Football Podcast and live stream. I'm Bradley Stalder at FF Stalder on Twitter. Tonight, joined by Jake Brandt at Jake Brandt 16. We're going to be discussing some fantasy gems for you. So we're going to look in the early rounds today, rounds 1 through 4, and we're going to offer a few players that we believe are going to be fantasy gems for you. In the mid rounds, we're going to offer a few more as well, rounds 5 through 10. And then we're going to offer a few late round considerations. Jake, welcome to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy to have you on. It's been a minute because for those who are unfamiliar, Jake and I go way back to the fantasy football fanalist days where Billy Muzio and I were podcasting, and Jake was actually the man working real hard behind the scenes to help make that a great success. So Jake, you've got the on-screen time. Welcome.
Bradley, thank you so much for having me. It's like I told you, actually taking my podcast cherry over here. And I don't know about working too hard behind the scenes, but I was definitely working for you guys. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Jake, it's been a minute. We are happy to be reunited here. But now under the Best Bell Fantasy Football name, we're going to jump right into it. Let's talk some early rounds. So in the early rounds, it's very crucial to get these right because you're investing a ton of draft capital, positional capital. You are saying these are the players that you want to be drafting. We want to have high levels of confidence. If these bust, it's very difficult for you to recover. I mean, yes, we've seen the first couple rounds bust. It's just more difficult, frankly, for your fantasy team to be successful if these don't hit. But let's start with a first player I'm going to offer. The first player I'm really in for this year in the early rounds is Nick Chubb. And I know that he's going anywhere from the mid end to the second round, but I saw him go at the 109 in an FFPC draft last night. Kevin Scott shared that draft board with me. I think that's a little too high for Nick Chubb. Everything is about the right price, but I think Chubb has the skill set. I mean, we're talking about a player who has rattled off 996 rushing yards each of the last 5 seasons or more. Last year, coming off a career high, 1,500 rushing yards, set career high in total touchdowns last year. 16.6 fantasy points per game in PPR. He has the pathway now to command more receptions in this improved, what we hope to be improved Cleveland Browns offense. Still 5 yards a carry every single season. Death taxes, and Nick Chubb is going to get it done on the ground for you. I think that he's a solid second round pick that can give back first round capital, but it's going to be hard for me to justify saying that I'm going to take him over Austin Eckler. I'm going to take him. It's hard to say those things, but it very well may be the case that Nick Chubb is the running back that's going to lead you to the promised land here in 2023. Jake, what are your thoughts on Nick Chubb here going in round 2?
I completely agree that he's a solid second round target. I wouldn't take him in the first. I wouldn't take him early second, but I think mid second to end of the second is great value for him. I mean, listen, he was number 3 in carries last year. So it's not like he didn't have as many opportunities to rush the ball because of Kareem Hunt, but he still was able to produce with those opportunities. Now, obviously, with Kareem Hunt being gone, he's obviously going to get a little bit more of the passing work. He only had a 56% snap share last year. So obviously we expect to see those increase going into next year. But I think as a value in the mid-second, he's fantastic. I don't know how many more carries he can get. He had over 300 last year. So I don't know how much they want to work him in and how much they're going to work Jerome Ford in, because obviously they didn't really add anything in the draft. They just have Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb back there right now.
Yeah, Ford is a player that a lot of people in the Browns organization have been hyping up and chirping up and saying he's our guy, he's the number 2. But it remains to be seen what kind of role Jerome Ford is actually going to hold in this Browns offense. Maybe it is Nick Chubb getting 70% of the snap share or more. That would be wheels up scenario. I just think that he's really safe play here in round 2, but he's a player that we shouldn't be ignoring. Like we shouldn't say, let some of the wide receivers or the third tier of wide receivers go. The names come to mind like T. Higgins. Like you should be drafting Nick Chubb over T. Higgins in preparation for this year. I mean, even the contingent upside of T. Higgins isn't going to get you the elite ceilings and even the highest of floors that Nick Chubb will offer you here. So Nick Chubb is my early round player, one of my early round players. Jake, give us an early round player. Are we going to stick in the division? Same team?
Yes, let's go ahead and do it. One of the early round players that I'd love to target at the end of the third round is Amari Cooper. One of the reasons for that is inconsistent quarterback play last year. He was ranked number 86 in terms of target accuracy at about 6.8, according to player profile. So he did not have that great of accuracy from the quarterback position, and now a full year to Deshaun Watson. Hopefully, we're going to see that improve. He was number 5 in air yards last year. He had a 38% air yard share, which puts wide receiver number 7. He had 9 touchdowns last year, so hopefully the touchdown number doesn't regress. And also finished as a wide receiver 2 at number 17 last year with that inconsistent quarterback play.
Yeah, Amari Cooper, we are projecting a lot that Deshaun Watson will take that step forward, a bounce back year. If we're in on this Browns offense, then you should also be in on Deshaun Watson later on in your fantasy drafts. He's going around quarterback 10, depends on where you're drafting, but around the back end of quarterback 1 territory. Amari Cooper only won 100 receiving yard game under Deshaun Watson. But as you mentioned, Deshaun Watson he had a lot of rust, coming into the 2022 season off that suspension. So we're in on the Cleveland Browns. Jake and I are here for the Cleveland Browns renaissance. It may be difficult for them to win the division, but there's reasons for optimism. I mean, if we even take a macro step back and look at the division, they're going to be in some shootouts. They're going to face the Bengals twice. They're going to face the Baltimore Ravens twice, and they're going to face an emergent Steelers offense. The Steelers were bad last year in terms of offensive efficiency, but we expect that step forward with Kenny Pickett. Deontay Johnson's due for some touchdowns. Pat Freiermuth is due for some touchdowns. So, Jake, I think that this is not only an individual player take, but also a macro scenario where the Browns are going to have to be scoring a lot of points in these game environments and that'll mean fantasy relevance for a lot of these players.
Absolutely. And I think, adding Elijah Moore only helps him because it's going to be someone else who draws away certain, coverages away from Amari Cooper rather than having only Donovan Peoples-Jones and, just another guy out there for a third wide receiver. You got David Njoku still going over the middle and everything like that. But I think that a full season to Deshaun Watson where he's able to go through the full offseason program with the Browns, he's able to practice every single day, not suspended for 12 weeks out of the year, out of an 18-week year. So I think that can only help Amari Cooper rather than hurt him.
All right, we'll stay in division with my next early round gem, and that's a player who's sometimes fall into the 5th round, but I've seen him go even into the 3rd round, and that's Lamar Jackson. We're staying in division. There are reasons for optimism for Jackson. Of course, we expect that he'll be healthy, that injury is not something that we're projecting into 2023, but we also have to be optimistic that the Baltimore Ravens replaced their offensive coordinator. Todd Monken is now there, and Todd Monken has the reputation of a faster pace, pass first offense. And the Baltimore Ravens have gone out of their way to address the wide receiver position. They didn't do so last year, right? It was just Rashad Bateman pretty much. And then you throw in like the Devin Duvernays, and heck, I don't even know if Deshaun Jackson like got some love.
The
But
ghost of Deshaun Jackson.
the ghost of Deshaun Jackson, right? But the ghost of Deshaun Jackson can still run a 4.3 for what it's worth.
Well, faster than I could ever run, I'll tell you that much.
But the Baltimore Ravens end up bringing in free agent Odell Beckham to an $18 million contract. They invest first-round draft capital in Zay Flowers, and they also sign sneaky deep threat Nelson Aguilar. This is an improved wide receiver core. Like Nelson Aguilar as your wide receiver 4, I'm not hating on that. Plus the possible emergence of Rashad Bateman if he can stay healthy, because he has dealt with recurring foot issues. So this is a player that we've seen him already lead the league in passing touchdowns. We've seen him be the quarterback 1 overall for fantasy. We've seen him be MVP of this league. So Lamar Jackson, round 4, with a better offense, there's more game. We talked about the Cleveland Browns and their divisional game environments. I mean, Lamar Jackson gets all of those. Plus, in week 17, even more so, you get the Miami Dolphins. And I am so in on the Baltimore-Miami correlation. Like, Jake, you and I were talking in the pre-show meeting about Baltimore and Miami, and we were talking about taking Hill and then Waddle in round 2, and then round 3 or 4, Lamar Jackson, and then you get your Rashad Batemans and Tua's later, and your Zay Flowers later, Odell Beckham's. There are a lot of pieces, and we'll get to some players that are later round stacks that are interesting in this game. But I'm in on Lamar Jackson round 4, and I think everyone else should be too. This is a player we shouldn't be ignoring.
No, I 100% agree. I love Lamar this year. Like you said, he did get a lot of weapons in this offseason, adding, Zay Flowers, adding also Odell Beckham this year and Nelson Aguilar. So he's definitely got room to improve. I mean, the part that's concerning for me is his completion percentage. Is he going to be able to be accurate, finish as quarterback 19 last year with just a 70% true completion percentage? Wasn't great throwing the ball down the field, finished as quarterback 31. So can he take that next step, and will these receivers be able to help him develop and go just a little bit farther? But like you said, I mean, getting those cheap stacks with Lamar, coming back with Zay Flowers in around 9 or 10, same thing with Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham's going just a few rounds later. Heck, even going Waddle, Hill, Andrews, Lamar is not a bad way to start your draft off at all. So I'm in on Lamar this year. I think he's going to be a great, great quarterback, and excited to see how they perform this year.
Well, we will shift gears to not the running back or quarterback position, but the tight end. You've got a tight end for us that we shouldn't be ignoring, Jake. And who is that?
No, TJ Hawkinson is definitely pretty close to my tight end 1. I actually have him as tight end number 2. And I think he can do great things this year. Saw a huge increase in targets when he was traded to Minnesota from Detroit. He was number 4 in tight end points per game, despite only having 1 game over 4 receptions through week 8. And he didn't really lose a whole lot in terms of target competition. They lost Adam Thielen. They signed Jordan Addison. Same other cast in terms of Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne. So Dak kind of figures to use him as a safety blanket with 17 first down catches on 3rd down last year and 15 on 2nd down. So he is one of the guys that Dak likes to target over the middle of the field and get those first down receptions and just keep moving the chains.
I mean, looking ever since the trade, this was a massive, massive deal for the Minnesota Vikings to get TJ Hawkinson. I mean, we're talking 6, 7, 8, 16 targets in week 16 against the Giants. Like, whew, what tight ends? I mean, we're talking Tyler Higbee's to level, way back a couple years ago when Higbee went on his absolute tear. But you want to be able to see massive target shares. And I think in the season-long leagues, TJ Hawkinson is probably a pretty good bet. I'm just my wonder is how much is TJ Hawkinson going to be affected near the end of the season by the emergence of Jordan Addison? Because Addison's going to be, in that Adam Thielen role, and he's going to run a lot of routes. We saw Thielen run a lot of routes, get a lot of targets. And we know first round wide receivers tend to spike a lot more in the second half of the season. So how is your outlook for Jordan Addison? And is it related to Hawkinson, or do you think both of them are just going to flourish here?
Well, as a Packer fan, I'm a little biased and hope Jordan Addison just completely falls on his face and doesn't do anything. But obviously, that is a little unrealistic. I mean, to me, it's one of those things where if you look at where his targets come from, a lot of them, he had one red zone target in week 19 against the Giants in the playoffs. He had one red zone target in week 17 against the Packers. He had 4 in the 16 target game. So a lot of his targets aren't coming in the red zone. It's a lot of the 20 to 20 work. So to me, that's not going to be as much of a factor because it's going to be those second and third down completions that he's going to get a lot of and still get you a lot of points due to a PPR bonus, B, also the fact that he's picking up 8, 10, 12 yards per catch. So I think Jordan Addison will be great. I think he's a great receiver, but I don't think it's going to affect TJ Hawkinson too much.
All right, we got a question in the chat before we move on to the middle rounds here, Jake. We want to know, what about Brock Purdy with Kittle stats? I like Hawk, but Kittle is better. I don't know. I looked at the breakdowns, or at least I looked at a tweet that Dwayne McFarland put out. Let me be more clear that there was a breakdown of the target shares between Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and CMC. And it was clear that Kittle was like the odd man out with those target shares. And so my concern is that, yes, I think Kittle has a higher in-game ceiling than Hawkinson. I think Hawkinson will still, get your 7, 8 targets, but when Kittle hits, he hits like a 30-point game, and he can do that pretty often because of his yards after catch ability. I don't think Hawkinson really has that part to his game that you're wanting. I mean, let me pull it up, but let me get your thoughts while I'm looking for the Hawkinson stat to prove my point.
I'm not too concerned with Kittle this year. I don't think he's going to be that great. If you look at the games that he had with Brock Purdy under quarterback, 2 targets, 6 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets. So he's not commanding a whole lot of that offense, and they want to be a run-first offense. They want to get Christian McCaffrey the ball. They want to get Elijah Mitchell the ball. And having Debo and Brandon Ayuk, there's not a whole lot of targets to go around there. I think he realizes his value as a blocking tight end, and I think he's going to be fantastic catching the ball, but I still think TJ Hawkinson's going to be a better fit for his offense and catch the ball a little bit better and get a lot more of the target share.
All right, yards after catch per reception. TJ Hawkinson last year was 17th out of 43 qualified tight ends with at least 30 targets. So mid-pack, fine. Maybe my hate wasn't there, but George Kittle was 7th. Okay, so I was right in the assessment, but it wasn't as disastrous for Hawkinson as I anticipated. So Fantasy Dog, there you go. In the game, talking about Hawkinson versus Kittle. I do have Hawkinson ahead of Kittle for 2023 as well. All right, let's keep it going here. We're going to move to the mid rounds, Jake, and I'm going to throw a name at you. And this is an NFL record-setting player, one who set the NFL record last year for most targets and receptions without a touchdown, and that is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson.
How does that happen?
Look, blind squirrel's nuts, right? I guess they don't find the nuts sometimes. But Deontay Johnson still 147 targets last year, 86 receptions. I mean, he's gone 3 straight years with at least 86 receptions, but 10.3 yards per reception. It was a career low. We know that Mitch Trubisky wasn't very good. We know that Kenny Pickett also struggled mightily, to get everything going in the Pittsburgh offense. The offensive line was atrocious last year. Najee Harris was dealing with the injury. Just the entirety of the Pittsburgh offense struggled. And so not scoring any touchdowns, Deontay Johnson. I mean, George Pickens is a nice emergent piece, but for Deontay Johnson to go in round 5, I mean, heck, I was getting Deontay Johnson on DraftKings much later than round 5, round 8, round 9, some places. I don't know. It was like there was a.
Where do you find these drafts? Because I would love to join them.
And it's full PPR too. It's not like you can afford to not have any touchdowns and still have Deontay Johnson be of value in those types of leagues. But I like the Deontay Johnson jump. Kenny Pickett, there are some green flags for Kenny Pickett. We know about his mobility. We talked about already the offensive line being addressed this offseason. Najee Harris expected to be healthy. Darnell Washington. There are other weapons, but Kenny Pickett was top 6 last year in PFF grade of throws 20 or more yards down the field. I mean, there are only 5 better than him. And so, yes, maybe limited sample size. Maybe that's your pushback. But at least there are some green flags for Kenny Pickett. And who's going to be getting a lot of those mid to deep throws? It's going to be Deontay Johnson more likely than George Pickens. I think it's still clear that Johnson is the target getter. Like, I think that Pickens is going to fit in really nicely as the wide receiver 2 in this offense, but I'm not sure if he can take that next step. Deontay Johnson, though, has the pedigree. I like him in round 5 as a bounce back candidate here.
I really do too, and I've been drafting a lot of Deontay Johnson this year. I am not on the Pickens train. I think he just isn't very good as an NFL wide receiver. I mean, you look at what he did last year. He was 91st in win rate versus man. He was even worse against zone. So he doesn't win a whole lot of routes, and that's obviously going to be the biggest thing to get targets. If you have to be able to win routes, get separation. So I think that plays very, very well for Deontay Johnson in terms of being able to command the targets. And ultimately, like you said, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So he's got to be able to find the end zone at least a couple times this year and have some positive regression coming from that.
Yeah, and I mean, the addition of Allen Robinson probably just fills in extra red zone threat. So maybe that's why I still think we're betting the over on 0.5 touchdowns for Deontay Johnson in 2023. But, that I think that anyone who's fading Deontay Johnson because of Allen Robinson, there's some folly there. There's some faulty logic.
Yeah, I can't see Deontay Johnson being scoring less touchdowns than he did last year. And if he does, that's impressive. And that might be the first time in NFL history that Deontay Johnson has ever scored negative touchdowns. I think there's a lot to like about Deontay, and I think he could be a mid wide receiver too, and being able to get that sort of value in round 5 is tremendous.
Well, let's move on to one of your mid-round picks. And this is a player who was really affected by the NFL draft. Talk to us about Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker is a guy that I can't stop clicking right now in drafts. And the reason for that is I don't think that Zach Charbonnet is going to play as much as what a lot of people think. I mean, you look at Pete Carroll's history in terms of drafting running backs. They don't play rookies very often. Robert Turbin, round 4 draft capital, 80 for 354 and 0 touchdowns for the year. Christine Michael, round 2 draft capital, 18 for 79 carries on the year. Spencer Ware, round 6, 3 for 10. Alex Collins, round 6, 31 carries for 125 yards. CJ Procise, round 2 draft capital, 30 carries, 172 yards. Chris Carson, round 7, 49 carries, 208 yards. And the most recent comparison is Rashad Penny in round 1, 85 carries for 491 yards in 14 games. So to me, they're bringing Zach Charbonnet in to kind of spell a lot of Kenneth Walker and still going to have him as the RB1.
That was what Seattle was missing last year, was a strong running back too. We've seen over the years Seattle struggle with injuries. I mean, we saw Chris Carson be forced into retirement due to the neck injury. Rashad Penny suffered his injuries, and Kenneth Walker himself dealt with injuries last year. He dealt with like knee and ankle injuries near the end of the year, but he also had a hernia surgery right before the start of the season that cost him the first game, and then the Seattle coaching staff moved him right along pretty slowly up until the Rashad Penny injury. But then it was just DJ Dallas and Travis Homer and just absolute grossness, behind Kenneth Walker. So I think that this was not a luxury pick, but you don't pick for depth here in the second round. I would have wanted, I would have been okay with Kenny McIntosh being that later running back. Like, that was fine, but giving Zach Charbonnet this extra work, I think is indicative of the need that the Seattle Seahawks perceive that they had. Like, we need to have a capable number 2 running back in case Kenneth Walker goes down.
Well, not even in case Kenneth Walker goes down, but we need to have someone who is capable of spelling him. They don't want Kenneth Walker to have an 80 to 90% snap share. That's just not good football. That's not good practice, and it's not going to make him last, and it's not what's best for him. So, I mean, I think that, like you said, that pick was out of need and not out of want. And I think that Kenneth Walker is still easily going to be the guy down there.
Yeah, I was big into Kenneth Walker. I don't know if, Jake, you have the full all-in subscription package, the draft guide, the famous draft guide about from Player Profiler, but the guy I recorded for was Kenneth Walker before the NFL draft, and I was like, there's no way that the Seattle Seahawks are going to be taking a day 2 draft capital running back. They're going to take like a guy who will just spell Kenneth Walker. Yeah, draft Kenneth Walker as a back-end second-round pick, like behind Nick Chubb, but that's fine. Like, it's going to be a pretty safe play. And his ADP has dropped from the back end of the second round to now into mid-round 5 in a lot of places. That's an absolute steal for a player that I believe is going to get, we've heard reports already, Kenneth Walker is going to get 17 touches, per game. I believe it. I believe that he's going to get that many, and mostly rushes. I think Charbonnet is the one that the Seahawks have pegged as the receiving back. I mean, last year, Zach Charbonnet was 14th among all running backs in the NCAA in PFF receiving grade at 77.2. So this is a player who is capable of receiving. Kenneth Walker just didn't do it at all in college, and he was not leaned upon much in Seattle last year to do it. So I think that that's more so the spell him, maybe replace him a few times on third down. I think that's going to be the role. But if fantasy drafters are taking Zach Charbonnet in like a 0 RB scenario, you're hoping it's as a handcuff and not like in an AJ Dillon scenario where there's not going to be as much standalone value, I think, for Zach Charbonnet as the market's indicating.
That's kind of actually the comp that I had for Zach Charbonnet was AJ Dillon, especially his rookie year. I mean, if you look, Kenneth Walker averaged 13.99 fantasy points per game in 11 starting games last year. That makes him RB7. They're not just gonna stop running a guy who is extremely efficient running the ball last year because, we spent round 2 draft capital on him. So I think you're right. They need him to be sort of a spell Kenneth Walker sort of situation, and they need him to kind of get that goal line work, which is kind of what they're banking on, is him playing that Jamal Williams sort of role where he's going to vulture all the touchdowns and, finish his RB2 because he scores 25 touchdowns this year.
Yes, give me all the Kenneth Walker love, all the Kenneth Walker propaganda. I am so here for it. The next player, we're going to stick in the mid rounds. We're also going to stick around for the running back position. And I'm so in on Cam Akers, the LA Rams. Yes, Akers came off the Achilles injury. He came back, and it was like Sean McVay was punishing him for coming back that early. Like, Akers played the first 5 games. He had 15, 12, 13 carries in 3 of those 5 games. But then he didn't play again till week 9. But from week 13 on, Cam Akers, 17, 12, 12, 23, 19, and 21 carries. He had 19, 34, 14, and 15 fantasy points, 9.3 and 13 as well. This is a player who has a volume high floor with a spike week ceiling, and he was doing that all on a really bad Rams offense. I mean, the Rams didn't even know who they were trotting out by the end of the year. Was it Baker Mayfield? Was it going to be Perkins? Right? Like we
were
don't
they
even
tanking or were they not tanking? They didn't even have a draft pick to tank for, so
exactly
they weren't even sure what they were doing.
Week 18, Cam Akers played 100% of the running back snaps. 100%. Just absolutely wild. We expect that the Rams will be better this year. They will get Cooper Kupp back. Sean McVay is coming back. Matt Stafford is playing in OTAs. Matt Stafford is reportedly on track to be just fine. Like, this is a sneaky Rams offense in a division where they're going to be able to score pretty easily, against Arizona, for instance, and they're also going to be playing catch up against the good teams like San Francisco, where San Francisco is going to be just beating up on their defense, and they're going to have to be passing and scoring and rushing, and Akers is going to be included in all of that. Plus, the question is, who else is there? Kyron Williams, right? Zach Evans. I mean, those are nobodies, Jake. There's nobodies. Cam Akers has 2nd-round draft capital to his name. He finished as a top 25 running back each of the last 6 weeks. This is a high floor with high ceiling potential. Give me Cam Akers in round 6 as a 0 RB candidate.
Oh, absolutely. I love Cam Akers this year. Like you said, coming off that Achilles injury, started off slow, getting in trouble with Sean McVay, whatever he did to get put in the doghouse down there. But those last couple of weeks of the year, you could really see a different version of him and kind of getting over that hump of having that Achilles injury. So, I mean, like you said, 17 carries in week 13. From then on, he was a fantastic running back to have.
Yeah, and he was from week 14 on, Cam Akers was running back 10 in PFF rushing grade. So, I mean, although there are some interesting guys ahead of it, like Kenneth Walker, we mentioned Kenneth Walker from weeks 14 to 18. Here, give a guess, Jake. We're going to put you on the spot. Pop quiz. Are you ready? Who is from weeks 14 through 18 of the regular season, who was the number 1 running back in terms of PFF rushing grade?
Oh, God. Saquon?
It was not Saquon. Where was Saquon at? Saquon was 19.
Oh, geez. I don't know. You're going to have to tell me on this one.
Tyler Algier.
Jeez.
Yeah. Right. Tyler Algier was absolutely crushing it near the end of the season, which makes the Bijan Robinson pick like I don't know. Like, I was almost going to comment on Matt Kelly and Ananda Naduri's post a couple days ago. They went on one of their podcasts, and they said that it was Anand gave the Falcons an F for their selection of Bijan Robinson, and like, it's hard to make the argument that like you'll pass on, a generational running back, but it's a running back in the first round, early
10
first
picks.
round. Jake.
Yeah. Going number 8. I mean, I wasn't a fan of the pick. I think Tyler Algier kind of proved that he deserved at least a couple more touches per game. And I still think he will get a couple more touches per game. You still got Cordero Patterson over there. So I don't see Bijan coming in and being that RB1 30 carry a week sort of running back. I think he's going to probably be right around that 15 touch per game range, and just kind of see what happens. Maybe as the year goes on, he starts to develop a little bit more and they start getting them around the 20, 22, 23. But I don't see much more than that, especially when you have a guy like Algier who proved that he belongs in the NFL and proved that he can play in the NFL.
It's so frustrating, but at the same time, I'm drafting a lot of Tyler Algier late because let's say Bijan gets hurt. Tyler Algier immediately jumps into mid running back 2 conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he's definitely RB 17, 18. And I mean, like you said, for the last, 5 weeks of the year, he was RB1 in terms of PFF grid. So he's proven that he can do it. They only added other pieces on offense. They bolstered up their offensive line. He could be even better this year.
Yeah, I mean, this was, and I don't want to get too sidetracked on this, but were the Falcons a generational running back away from the Super Bowl? If the answer was no, then Bijan was the wrong pick. If the answer is yes, then Bijan's the right pick. But I anticipate that you're going to say, Jake, the Falcons were not a running back away, and this possibly was a mistake. So give me your last thoughts, and then we'll move on to your last mid-round player.
The Falcons are kind of interesting for me because were they a generational running back away? Obviously not. We both know that. But do they know what they have with Desmond Ridder? No. What quarterback was there at 8 that was really going to be someone that moves the needle for them? They would have had to trade up and get CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, or even Bryce Young to be able to kind of say that. And then they might have been a generational running back away because they bolstered up their defense quite a bit this offseason. They added a lot to their offensive line. Obviously, having Drake London, Kyle Pitts is definitely going to help. And they want to be a run-first team. We saw that last year with Arthur Smith as the head coach. He wants to run the ball. So I think it's a piece that definitely helps him get closer to that goal. But he wasn't the missing piece in terms of what caused him to not make the playoffs or the Super Bowl.
Yeah, if only there was, a quarterback that was available to them that back in 2021 had like a 90 PFF passing grade, that has a strong arm and mobility and would be able to hit the Kyle Pitts and Drake Londons of the world down the field. I wonder if there was a play of, oh yeah, he fell significantly in the draft. It was Will Levis. Yes, Levis had a bad 2022, but I think it's going to be interesting to see who is the real true Will Levis, right? I think
I'm not on Will Levis at all. I don't think he's very good, and I don't think he'll be that good at the pro level. I mean, there's a reason why he didn't get drafted in the first round. Not saying that you have to be drafted in the first round to be good, but I
no
think
shade to Dak Prescott at all.
Yeah. Or Russell Wilson or any of the other guys. I mean, Aaron Rodgers fell 23 picks. So it's something that definitely can happen. I just think that, there's something not quite there, and he couldn't even beat out Sean Clifford over at Penn State. That's kind of saying something to me. The fact that he couldn't beat him out, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's terrible. All right, well, let's finish the mid rounds and then we'll get to the end of the last round or near end of your draft consideration gems. Give us your last mid round player here, Jake.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with another wide receiver and one who's coming into a really good situation. He has a couple older vets to learn from, and he has a brand new offensive coordinator who was top 4 in points per game and yards per game. over the course of his previous 4 years over in Dallas, and that is Quentin Johnson. I think
Oof.
he is going to be a guy who surprises a lot of people and has the potential for mid wide receiver two upside, potentially even low end wide receiver one upside. Mike Williams has missed multiple games every single season that he's been in the NFL. Not only that, he's also coming off a serious back injury where he got hurt last year. And then Keenan Allen is 31 years old. The big scouting report on him was he's dynamic with the ball in his hands and he is fantastic after the catch. So I think he's a guy that we could see become Justin Herbert's wide receiver one for years to come.
Look, it's not going to be hard to beat out Josh Palmer as the wide receiver 2 on this team, or wide receiver 3 on this team, and then eventually take over as either the 1 or the 2. I mean, Josh Palmer last year, 65 PFF receiving grade. Like the lowest PFF receiving grade among qualified wide receivers was 60, and that was Marvin Jones. So Palmer was not very good at all. So I mean, let's even just from a fantasy perspective, because there was a game against, I think it was the Atlanta Falcons last year, where both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen missed, and Josh Palmer stepped in. And Palmer got like double-digit touches, but like didn't do much with them, right? And so I think the Chargers are looking at this situation and saying, let's not only invest in the future with a first-round pick like Quentin Johnston, yards after the catch guy, as you mentioned, a downfield threat. But we also want a guy who, if our wide receivers get injured, we want somebody who can step in and be a dynamic player, because Josh Palmer's not it.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at what he did over the course of his career at TCU, he averaged 19 yards per reception, and that's not nothing. So he is definitely a guy who's explosive with the ball in his hands. And yeah, they absolutely needed to upgrade at wide receiver 3, seeing that Josh Palmer is not that great. And then I think Kellen Moore, having him come over, is a huge gain for them and absolutely going to have Justin Herbert playing a little bit better and have that overall offense playing a little bit better. We've already seen that Staley likes to go for it on 4th down, so that whole analytical side of the offense is going to keep growing, and that's going to produce more opportunities. So more opportunities is a better thing for Johnson as long as he can get on the field early and then a couple things break his way.
And the Chargers have been scraping and clawing for some wide receiver 3 to emerge. I mean, they were running out just these nothing wide receivers for years and years.
DeAndre Carter,
the Chris Moores of the world, whoever it is. I can't even think of just some of the no-name wide receivers.
Williams.
Some of these wide receivers are just, it's been so bad for the Chargers. Finally, they invest in a first-round wide receiver, but also I'm going to throw out a late dart, Darius Davis. Darius Davis was drafted really late. Once again, a speedster, undersized guy, and like an 18th round consideration. So just throwing it out there. It's a good segue into our late rounds here, Jake. Darius Davis, by the way, was a special team star as well. So you like to see that from your prospects getting good work in the special teams. Let's move finally to the late rounds. Look at us. We're late round. We're not going to talk there is going to be one late round quarterback Jake's going to give to us, but I'm going to start with round 11, Jakobi Meyers. And I went through the BestBell value rating, and I ran a regression comparing the BestBell value rating from the previous year to the ADP this year. And there were only 2 players that really stuck out in a massive way in below where their expected ADP would be based on their production the previous year. One of them was Jakobi Meyers. The other was Zay Flowers. But Jacoby Myers is getting drafted in round 11. This is a player, 25% target rate each of the last 3 seasons. 22% target share each of the last 2 seasons. This is a player who, yes, he's moved to the Las Vegas Raiders, but we've already heard rumblings about Davante Adams not being happy. Could a trade happen either later this offseason or in midseason? Sure. Could Hunter Renfrow be traded? Yeah, possibly. We've already heard rumblings about that. We've already seen Darren Waller be pushed out because of Jacoby Myers. And I am here for all the Jacoby Myers propaganda. This is a player who played a lot in the slot. And if you're a believer that Jimmy Garoppolo can't throw well downfield, he's going to throw to the slot then and to Jacoby Myers. So give me a player who has historically commanded targets, where there is a need for offense, and there you're getting a couple round discount value. I have Jacoby Myers graded as like a round 8 player instead of a round 11. So Jake, any thoughts on Jacoby Myers?
Yeah, my first thought is Jimmy Garoppolo really worse than Mac Jones? We're talking about quarterback play here. Is that really that big of a decrease in quarterback talent? I don't think it is. So, it's really not an argument to say, oh, well, he doesn't have a great situation right now. Yeah, there's questions about Jimmy G's health and everything like that. Aiden O'Connell, who's going to be the starter over there. But I think Jimmy ultimately passes the physical and becomes a starter down there. But yeah, I like Jacoby Myers a lot, and I was drafting him a lot more earlier on in the offseason than I have been lately, just because I've had other targets around that same sort of area. But you're right. Hunter Renfrow, there's already talks about trading him. They're looking to trade him. Davante Adams isn't happy. Okay, so both those guys get traded. Then who? DeAndre Carter? I know he just signed there, so bring him back up.
We'll call him the cockroach from now on. DeAndre Carter, the cockroach.
Getting all the shares that nobody wants.
Fantasy Dog jumps in the chat and asks, is Jimmy G the quarterback? Doesn't Vegas have Stidham? And the follow-up question is about, Jimmy's contract void due to medicals. I don't think it was voided. I think there was just an addendum in the contract saying that, I don't know why this is sticking for me, but there was an addendum in the contract saying that the contract could be voided if he can't play because of it. And then regarding Stidham, he's now in Denver, actually. So, no, it could get pretty ugly. I think it's just Aiden O'Connell, right, in Vegas behind Jimmy Garoppolo. So this could be a pretty wild fall for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Can't wait to see Carson Wentz throwing passes to Davante Adams.
I'm so here for it. And for what it's worth, Carson Wentz was like a top 6 quarterback last year in terms of rate of top 5 weeks as a fantasy quarterback. He played like 2 real schlep defenses at the beginning of the season, and one of them was the Lions, and he ended up like going off against the Lions early in the season. So if you had like the Carson Wentz, Jared Goff combination, you were like sitting real pretty.
My farthest advancing team last year in best ball had a combination of Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz, and I believe Ryan Tannehill was in there too. So I am not too far off in terms of the Jared Goff Carson Wentz combination.
Well, speaking of which, let's talk about Jared Goff. He's one of your late round considerations and gems. What is it that's appealing about Jared Goff here in round 11?
Well, first off, the quality of competition in the NFC North just is not what it is. I think Dan Campbell has done a tremendous job over there. Last year he was 6th in pass attempts, 7th in red zone attempts, and 6th in passing yards. So they obviously want to sling the rock. And not only that, they also brought in a receiving back in Jahmyr Gibbs, who is supposedly known to be one of the better receivers to come out of college in a while. So I think their game plan is just to get the balls out to their skill position on the edge and let them go to work. And just because he doesn't throw it very far down the field doesn't necessarily mean that he's still not going to get those fantasy points for it. So if you wanted to pass on a guy like Lamar Jackson or one of the big three in the early rounds and still have a guy who has potential for a little bit of higher upside, Jared Goff is definitely a great play a little bit later in the draft.
Yeah, you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs. Amon-Ra St. Brown, has been a revelation over the last couple seasons. Jared Goff last year was, where is it? Let me sort by, there we go. Jared Goff was quarterback 4 in rate of top 5 weeks among all quarterbacks. That's ahead of Trevor Lawrence, ahead of Joe Burrow, ahead of Justin Fields, ahead of Lamar Jackson, ahead of Dak, Kyler, Tua, Russ, Tom Brady. Like, only Jalen Hurts, only Josh Allen, only Patrick Mahomes ahead of Jared Goff. So we're here for some Jared Goff love. I'm 25 minutes outside Detroit, and the Lions fans are rabid for this 2023 season. They're feeling the momentum. They're feeling the vulnerability of our poor Packers here, Jake. I think the Packers are going to be in a lot of trouble. But, it's, and there's even been some chatter about a Jared Goff extension. Who would have thought?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Like, Jared Goff was a toss-in. He was a toss-in in the Matthew Stafford trade. He was like, please take these 2 first-round picks off our hands. Also take this, Pro Bowl
dangly little quarterback over
Super
here.
Bowl, quarterback off our hands, please.
Yeah, I mean, he was super accurate last year, too. He was number 12 in true completion percentage. He was number 7 in deep ball completion percentage. He was 12th in play action completion percentage. So he was able to find his targets really, really well. So, I mean, he's one of those guys that is continuing to improve. And those are the guys that I like to target in fantasy drafts.
Well, and once he gets back from suspension, Jameson Williams, baby, he's my comp for him, and I love this comp, is Will Fuller. Like, this is a first-round pedigree wide receiver who plays in a dome, who's gotten in trouble with the league, is a thin, skinny, fast wide receiver. All we need is a mysterious finger injury to derail his career, and I think we've got the Will Fuller full career arc. So
yeah, well, we need a couple good seasons from him first before we can have that finger injury. So let's push that down the line a little bit. I mean, but yeah, once we get that finger injury, then we're going to know that it's just Will Fuller reincarnated, because Will Fuller seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. So it's about time a new one came forward.
Look, I even tweeted at Evan Silva, because Evan Silva has connections to the Notre Dame community. And I was like, hey, Silva, can you tell me, like, what is the deal with Will Fuller? Are we going to expect him to be coming back anytime at all? And Evan Silva's like, no, that dream is dead. I was like, okay, well, and then I immediately dropped Will Fuller from all of my dynasty leagues that I had just like scooped him up for free.
Like, oh, he's a $1 waiver bid.
So we're gonna shift to the last few here. My boy Tyler Conklin is a late round consideration. Conklin is one of only 7 tight ends to top 550 yards in each of the past 2 seasons. He's projected to be the number 1 tight end for the New York Jets. I mean, last year, 58 receptions was second most on the Jets, 550 yards. He only had 3 touchdowns, but we know how much Aaron Rodgers loves to target his tight ends in the red zone, in the end zone. Tyler Conklin is that guy. He's 6'3", 254. He can move really well. I mean, 4.8 40 isn't great, but he's got 89th percentile burst score, 75th percentile agility score. He is a wide target, and he's one of the most underrated tight ends in the NFL. Billy called me out a couple years ago for watching Conklin film late at night. He's like, what are you watching, Bradley? And I'm like, nothing, just Tyler Conklin film. And Billy and I even got into this big debate about Conklin versus Irv Smith way back in the day. And I emerged victorious. Let me just put that out there, that Billy was wrong about Irv Smith and I was right about Tyler Conklin. So let me just continue my rightness. Conklin is the tight end, the late round tight end that you want. double-digit touchdowns are within his range of outcomes, not because of him, but because of Aaron Rodgers. We saw this with Robert Tonyan, the big Bob Tonyan, catching double-digit touchdowns. That's within the range of outcomes. We don't know who's going to be, the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 behind Garrett Wilson. We know it's going to be Wilson, and then maybe it's Mecole Hardman. Maybe it's Allen Lazard. Maybe it's, I don't know, Corey Davis Renaissance season. Maybe it's Randall Cobb, because Randall Cobb was actually not terrible last year, and he wasn't terrible the year before. Like, this is what's wild, is everyone has been so out on Randall Cobb, is like, oh, he's dusty, he's old. Yeah, I get it, blah, 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 whatever. Randall Cobb, give the guy some credit for sticking around and staying with his boy. But look, Tyler Conklin is the tight end you want. CJ Uzama's not it. Jeremy Ruckert's not it. Any of the other tight ends, they're not it. It's going to be Tyler Conklin this year. Take it to the bank.
Yeah, no, I agree with that pick. I mean, I think that a very, very close comp for Tyler Conklin this year is Jermichael Finley. Back in the early 2010s, 2011, 2012, where Jermichael Finley was the tight end for the Packers. I mean, Jermichael Finley's 6'4", 247. So he is pretty similar in terms of build. He runs the same sort of routes that Tyler Conklin does. And heck, he finished as tight end number 11 in targets, nearly 100 targets. Finished as tight end 12 in terms of reception yards back in 2012. So there is a lot to like about Rodgers and his tight ends. I mean, like you said, we got to see it a lot just being Packer fans and the amount of games that they have on national television and everything. But I think Conklin's a great pick, especially if you want to wait on tight end and grab 2 or 3 a little bit later. He's definitely one to target that you can get in round 15, 16, 17.
Well, we'll stick around in round 16. This is a surprising player, frankly. Jeff Wilson. Jake, talk to us about Jeff Wilson and why he's one of your late round guys.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson is a guy I cannot stop clicking on right now. I mean, ever since he came over from San Francisco, he must have something on Mike McDaniel, because as soon as he came over, he had to have done something. But he has just outtouched Mostert in nearly every single game. Last year, in the 7 healthy games that they had together, he outtouched him in 4. Tied in 1, and Mostert outtouched him in 2. So he doubled the amount of games that he had more touches. They also brought in Devin Achane this year. And I see Achane being a lot more similar to Raheem Mostert than I do to Jeff Wilson. So even if Mike McDaniel wanted to split touches, not get like 15, 20 touches per person, but if they wanted to be about that 10 to 15 sort of range, I don't think that Jeff Wilson's going to be the one losing the carries. I think it's mostly going to be Mostert.
Yeah, I think it's Mostert too. I mean, Mostert is he'll be 32 during the season. This is a player we love. Mostert's speed, but you mentioned Achane fits that similar profile. It's funny. Like, Wilson is going after Mostert when it was Wilson ahead of Mostert until the Dalvin Cook news. Make that make sense for me, Jake. Like, Dalvin Cook hasn't even signed yet, and Jeff Wilson's dropped 2 rounds after Raheem Mostert.
Right. I mean, and Dalvin Cook has the chance to pick wherever he wants to go. He might not even want to go to Miami. I'm hearing that he might want to go play with his brother up in Buffalo and go sign up there. So there's a very good likelihood that he won't even go to Miami. And then what? Then you're relying on a guy who is going to be splitting carries with a rookie this year and just ignoring the other guy, treating him like the odd man out, when actually it's the other way around.
That's fair. I also can't stop clicking Jeff Wilson here in round 16. So I'm going to give one bonus one. It's a wrap up the show tonight. Jake, you've been a great guest jumping into the BestBell Fantasy Football podcast live stream. I'm going to leave everyone with this late round consideration. Dwayne McBride, no matter what. That's right. Dwayne McBride. Draft your Dwayne McBrides. He's the beast. Top tier PFF rushing grade last year, number 1 in yards after contact per attempt. Give me Dwayne McBride. Alexander Madison is nothing more than just a guy. And Ty Chandler is 25 years old. Come on, give me Dwayne McBride. All right. Well, Jake, it's been great having you on. Tell the people, will make sure you guys are following Jake at Jake Brandt 16. Any other things you want to drop here, Jake?
No, not really. That's about it. I will be at the Scott Fish Bowl live draft next weekend out in San Francisco. So if you see me out there, come say hi. Love to get a drink and just talk ball.
All right. Well, Jake, it's been a pleasure getting us back together. It's been a lot of fun. On behalf of Jake, I'm Bradley. And until next time, everyone, good luck in the best ball streets.
I embrace all this wisdom insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still.